Hi, this is Khalil Guliwala, host of the BIPOC Management Podcast. And today's episode, I'm excited to have Joey Odman with us. Joey Odman is a real estate development professional. He's currently Vice President of Construction Development at Group RMC, President of the McGill Alumni Association. Why I've got Joey here is because Joey's achieved a level of success that very few people born in North America have achieved and very few minorities have achieved. Joey, please.
Well, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joey. One of the things I would love to ask you, Joey, is again, given your success, I'm sure you thought about it. Like, what are you doing differently that you think other people are not doing? Minorities in particular. Like, what are you doing to stand out and build the level of success that you have?
Yeah. So that's a interesting question. I feel like I don't do anything different when I just think about it, but there are certain things that I guess people have said about me or said to me about the things that I do. Number one, probably, and I'd say this is just in general, is I tend to listen to people a lot, which sounds very simple. But a lot of people in conversations just wait for someone else to sort of talk and don't really get to know people and kind of hear and listen. So I'm someone that I enjoy meeting people, connecting people, listening to them, and hearing sort of their story. And I think what that's sort of done over time is that it's allowed me to meet so many people, so many great people, build connections with people, deeper connections than you normally do when you're just having surface level conversations. And I think with time, that's just trickled out to creating a network of friends, support, and family, and things like that. And that's really, in large part, what's gotten me to where I am is the people around me. A lot of luck, to be very honest, being at the right place at the right time, and then just being very open to everyone and other people and things like that. Honestly, I think that's probably one of the bigger things. I know that there's a lot of challenges to like overcome and things like that, but I feel like a lot of it is when you get to know people, when people get to know you, and not just like this surface level version of you of like coming into a interview or whatever it may be, but really genuinely get to know you. The reality is, at that point, you're really bonding with people, and I think that's what's super important. Like we're just a bunch of people trying to be loved and get to know people and enjoy ourselves, and the best way to do that is with other people.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying, like, because is that the fact that whenever the idea is that you've got this huge network of people around you and individuals. And I think what's kind of hitting me more is the fact that you're saying this is, I was at a networking event the other day and I was talking to somebody saying, hey, like who's of an Indian background. I was like, what's stopping you from progressing in your career? And he kept talking about, oh, I need to get further education. I need to get more certification.
Yeah.
But surprised by because I was like, don't you want to meet people? Don't you want to, I mean, first of all, professionally, but also just enlarging who you are. And I felt
Yeah.
like maybe that's, and then what brought you up talking about listening, that almost that difference between, I think maybe minorities focus so much on kind of being perceived a certain way to like education, certification, versus just going out and meeting people and talking to them.
Yeah, I think that one thing that happens very commonly, and I don't want to generalize, but oftentimes, minority families, the hopes and aspirations for the family is, lawyer, doctor, engineer, or disappointment to the family. That's typically how it goes. So I think education for a lot of cultural groups is super important and often put above quality of life, above family, above a lot of things. So we tend to think that education is the most important thing. And don't get me wrong, it is extremely valuable. I think it's an additional tool in your tool belt. But sometimes some people do spend a bit more, a bit too much energy focusing on education instead of focusing on what's around them and near them. And this is something that I've spoken about a lot, particularly in a lot of the mentorship programs that I've done, about trying to focus as much time on what you learn as meeting people that are also doing the same as you. Because oftentimes being the best student, putting your head down, going to class, and learning everything will give you some knowledge. But what it will not give you is learning how other people think, how other people react, how other people's thought process go. And the reality is, as you move up in life and as you progress in your career, you're going to work in a team. You're going to work with other people. And that's one of the biggest skills, is learning how to work with other people. How do other people think? How do other people react? And the greatest way to practice that is in an education setting where you're sort of forced to do that. And where you have these opportunities. Like it's often lost on people that as you move on further and later on into your life, you don't go and sit with 60 or 100 people every day that are just rotating and new, that are all willing to speak to you. That becomes further and farther apart as you sort of get older. So use those opportunities, particularly in the education setting. Now, obviously there's particular careers where the specific degree is very, very important, like being a doctor. But there's a lot of other places where you'll learn almost as much as you go versus what your education teaches you. And I think that's another thing that's often lost on people, is they think that they're going to learn everything about their job from school, versus the reality is that school kind of justifies that you know how to understand and think critically and things like that, but you'll really be doing what you learn in the work environment.
Yeah. Something I want to kind of focus on, Joey, is that you mentioned sort of like mentorship programs, right? And the idea is a lot of education isn't just happening within sort of, you studying from a book or a class, really the people around you. Can you talk a bit more maybe of like the roles mentors have played in your life, or like in some sense also maybe perhaps you as a mentor to other people?
Yeah, for sure. I think mentorship, at least for me, mentorship has always been one of the sort of cornerstones of building my career, building my life, and things like that. I've been very fortunate to grow up in a family where there was a lot of exchange in terms of education, things like that. My mom was a teacher, so the idea that like you pass on knowledge was sort of ingrained in me at a very, very young age. The idea that no matter what you're trying to do, someone somewhere has probably tried it before, and whether they succeeded or failed, you could probably learn something from them in what you're doing, is something that really sort of stuck with me. And I think that for me, and this probably goes back to your first question as well, is how managers or mentors, sorry, have helped me with my career, is that I've had mentors for different things. I've had mentors for real estate, right? I've had a lot of great mentors for, how to progress in real estate, how to understand the markets, how to understand construction, how to do these things. I've had mentors that had no concept of real estate, but that were very, very good at kind of organizational behavior, sort of like how do you think critically with people, how do you like deal with group dynamics. So those were great mentors for those. I was fortunate at a time to have a sort of corporate coach that helped me a lot as well, in terms of, how what you put out is perceived, particularly when you're trying to manage large groups of people. How do you make sure that, as a leader, you are grabbing everybody around you and bring them on board versus just sort of being this dictatorial figure. But all of these sort of like different mentors have sort of helped me sort of with over time with my career for different aspects. I don't know if that sort of answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's coming back to sort of that original kind of statement where sort of that focusing on listening to people, understanding from people around you. I think that's sort of like a recurring theme over here.
Yeah.
I think maybe a question I'd like to ask you sort of, when it comes to sort of, selecting mentors, is there like, is there a process that you have when you talk, like, is there something, or is it like, what level is it organic? What level is it strategic? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you about when I first started in real estate. One thing that I did to try to find mentors and to try to connect with people is I cold called everyone I could imagine. Anytime I heard a name like 2 or 3 times in a meeting of someone that seemed to be special or important or have something that I should learn from, I'd write their name down. I'd try to look them up. This was like early days of LinkedIn too, so it wasn't as easy to find people. So I try to like find a contact, and I cold email, hey, do you want to go for lunch or chat or whatever? I also work in real estate. Probably worked 20% of the time. But that 20% was great, right? So finding mentors was in part with that. I think that the harder thing with finding mentors, for me at least, was finding mentors for being a minority in the spaces that I've been in, because sort of to the point that you made before, there's not a lot of people that look like me in what I do. There's not a lot of people that have the same background as me in what I do. And, you know, to find a mentor to whom I can speak to with some of the challenges related to my background, that's a lot harder. Because if you haven't had people be in those particular spaces, it's hard to sort of share sort of that knowledge. So that's been probably the larger challenge in terms of finding mentors in my career. I've had one that's been sort of invaluable in terms of that within the industry. But to be very honest, I think we're each other's because we're sort of two of the few people within the industry. So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful. I think I think what's any mentor at some point, you don't. I think that there's a mentor-mentee kind of like imbalance of knowledge, but over time, like you have a companion. I think that
Yeah,
equality is a good feeling.
yeah. I would almost say like I think people always think of or often think of mentorship as like top down, as like the mentor is going to teach the mentee. I feel like I've probably learned way more from my mentees than I've taught them.
Yeah.
To be honest, it is an exchange. I think if you're looking for a mentor and for mentorship, I think you have to look at it as an exchange and not like as this one-sided transactional thing. You're
Yeah.
trying to get to know and learn someone, to learn how they think, to learn it, all these things so that you can then understand what they're teaching you. Because if you just take the information without understanding their context, that's just school, right? That's what school is giving information without having necessarily all of the emotional and background and context of the individual giving you that information. The beauty about mentorship is that's a lot closer. You can understand that when someone says the answer is four, well, that's based on all the biases that they've had their entire life. That's based on their career, that's based on their experience, that's based on good and bad things. And you as a mentee can sort of see that and take the good and the bad and sort of understand that and generate that for yourself. So yeah, mentorship is probably, find the one thing I would tell to everybody is find yourself some good mentors as much as you can and as many as you can for as many different aspects of your career. Not one mentor can teach you everything.
Mm.
You'd be surprised what you learn from people that you don't think you can learn from.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. On that point, Jay, I'd like to understand a bit more stuff. I think there's a misconception, sort of the mentor-mentee relationship being top-down, one directional.
Yeah.
And I think as a mentee, always looking for the value a mentor can give you. But can you talk a bit more, sort of, you as a mentee, what kind of value do you think that you like how do you kind of think about it as like what kind of value can I give this mentor? Like, is that do you find that very based upon the domain? Like, can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, mentorship does tend to be an exchange. So, you know, someone that might be really, really good at organizational behavior might not necessarily have skills in construction, right? Like as a basic example. So, although I will learn a ton of organizational behavior stuff, I might be able to share some stuff on construction.
Okay.
Or, something as simple as I might learn a lot of organizational behavior and I might teach a lot about my culture. Or different things. Like the reality is we all have something to share, something to teach, something to give, we all have some inherent value. And when you take the time to listen, to speak, and things like that, you'll realize that you have a lot more to give to a mentor than you think. People often think it's like it has to be so structured, like it's got to be clear, like how is this going to get me more money, a higher title, a better job, it's some people try to be too systematic about it.
Yeah.
And that shows, right? Is if you approach someone and it's clear that you're just trying to find a way to get, like you're using them as a step to get to somewhere else, that's not mentorship.
Yeah.
You really have to approach it of a context of like, no, I'm creating this long-term exchange of information where we're both going to sort of benefit from it. Me as a mentee from the knowledge and experience of the mentor, and for the mentor, me as a mentee, the youth and or if there is an age difference or whatever, or sort of some of the other things that I carry that I bring, and also just in the questions that I'm going to ask and the things that I'm going to want to wonder, it'll make the mentor think. I know that's happened to me a lot, where mentees will ask me something that have nothing to do with even what I'm mentoring them for. It's something like, hey, like, oh, when you played football, did you like that? And you're like, oh, I never really thought about this. Like, would you let your kids play football when you play? You know, like those sorts of things that like all of a sudden you're exchanging on different levels, and then it just sort of gets you to connect a bit more.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
Joey. So just to kind of turn direction a little bit, I think, like in terms of minorities, I think we've all kind of faced prejudice in some form or the other in professional environments. Can you talk about stuff like what kind of maybe strategies you've kind of used to kind of like face prejudice?
Yeah. So it'll probably not be lost on your viewers that the industry that I'm in is inherently not very diverse. And also it's an industry that you meet a lot of people in a lot of walks of life and a lot of different backgrounds, which is very fun and interesting and great, but also does have its challenges when you look the way that I look. Um, and I think over my career, a lot of that has changed and evolved depending in different places. There's a lot of things that I used to do that I felt were important that I don't anymore, but that's also because I'm in a different place in my career. I can give you an example of, when I started off in real estate, I would wear a suit and a tie every day. Every time I went to a construction site or met a contractor or anything, I was always in a suit and tie because I had this idea in my head that if I was the person that was in charge, I had to look like the person that was in charge. A bit of a like imposter syndrome, where I didn't see anybody that like looked like me in anything that I did. So I just sort of tried to emulate the look that I saw of what I thought was an important person in real estate. I was like, oh, it's a person with a suit and a tie. Which looking at it today, first of all, nobody wears ties anymore. But looking at it today, I look back on that, and it had its place and its reasons at that time, but it was just like something that I felt that I had to do to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Now, with time, I've garnered the respect of my colleagues and the people that work in the industry that I don't need to wear that mask
Mm.
because people sort of know who I am. So it's become inherently easier for me with time to sort of navigate through that. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen regularly every day. That there's a comment, there's a thing, there's something. I think as any minority in North America, you're going to be confronted with things like that, whether it's your work life, your professional life, your personal life, or whatever. But I think a lot of that just comes down to me, two things: sort of intent. So the intent of the person sort of coming at you with whatever it is, and then your reaction, right? You can't control the other person's intent, but you can control your reaction. And in a work setting, it's challenging because sometimes I know for me, like I'm not someone that lets things go very easily. So I tend to push back more than I do, which makes people know where I stand, but also does sometimes create some tensions and conflict. Very honestly, I think it's one of those things where it's like you have to see what your values are, where's the line in the sand for you, and make sure that you stay true to yourself. You have to ask yourself the right questions of like, if it wasn't for the paycheck or if it wasn't for this, is this the environment that I want to be in, that I can thrive in, that I'd be happy in? If the answer to all of those is no, uh, you know, think about what that should look like for you. Try to find that, and it will not be easy, right? That's the reality. I can speak on the construction real estate industry. Very very small, very small group of people when you really think about it in terms of an industry. Very very white male dominated for sure. So as much effort as you put in as an individual until the entire industry does, you're going to be on the kind of back end of it, having to do a lot more to feel comfortable, more so than the people around you, because you're one individual, but you're surrounded by 1,000 people. 1,000 people need to make a little bit of change. You need to make a lot to take 1,000 people coming your way. So yeah, so I think a lot of it for me has been, try to really fall back on what your values are. I'm a big values person, so as long as my values are aligned, I'm willing to have a conversation and go with it. But if you go outside of that sort of line, for me, that's where I just kind of push back and say, no, that's not gonna fly with me.
Thank you, Joey.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, is there anything that you like to mention, anything you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, I think maybe just following up a bit on what I was saying earlier on, like sort of mentorship, communication, and sort of trying to gain success, I guess, in a career and advancement. I think the one thing that I would like to try to tell people and share with people is like one is being patient. Like I was very impatient in my career to wanting to get to certain levels, and there is a certain aspect of it that is time, unfortunately, time to meet people, to learn from them, to gain experience, to do these things. But there's also a part of it that is personal growth, and I think an equally important thing, and probably something that's good because if people are listening on this, they're probably doing this already, is working on yourself. I think one of the things, coming back to what you said before, of like what's one of the things that I do that other people probably don't, is I can tell you I'm a different person today than I was yesterday, because every single day that I can, I try to better myself. Whether it's someone gives me a comment and I react, and then I think about my reaction and how I could do it, how I could change, whatever, or whether it's educating myself on something new, whether it's new technologies, whether it's reading a book, whether it's going to conferences, whether it's meeting people. I think if you're continuously working on yourself in whatever shape that actually makes you happy, right? Like I do a lot of outdoor things. That's where I get a lot of my joy. So I concentrate on that a lot. Having that balance for me is super important, spending time outside of work. But I think if you're continuously finding the things that will, the good things that make you happy, that keep you motivated, that keep you moving forward, that's really what, in my opinion, life is about. Concentrate on those. Try to do those. The other things will come. Fighting against everything all the time isn't going to get you anywhere.
Yeah, exhausting.
Yeah.
I thank you, Joey. Thank you for appearing. So that's the BIPOC Manager podcast. Joey, so if someone wants to follow you or keep in touch with you, what's the best place for them to do that?
Probably if you're gonna call me like I used to, I'd say LinkedIn's probably the easiest. If you want to see me climbing mountains and doing crazy outdoor stuff, I guess Instagram. If you look up my name, I'm pretty sure you can find me. So that would be the easiest.
Yeah, I gotta say, Flo. I mean, my wife Flo, she showed me some of the videos of you kind of breaking this ice off a mountain, like the sheet, and I was like, wow, like that's so Joey.
Yes, yeah,
Leading the situation, like, yeah, and saving lives. I mean, honestly, it was preventable. Like I was like, wow, like that's Joey.
oh, the avalanche thing.
Yeah, but it
Yeah,
was like, and I was like, yeah, that's Joey. Like he's like, you gotta do this.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I love being outdoors, man. That's I if I could find it's very conflictual when you think about it, like the industry that I work in and like my real passion, they're kind of at opposite ends in certain ways. I guess at one point, hopefully I'll be able to bridge the gap between the two where real estate and the outdoors kind of work better in harmony than they do today, but we'll see.
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe it's like in Night of the Roxbury, where like the inside of the building looks like the outside.
Yeah, exactly. It's an
Well,
inside outside building.
well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Joey, for being a guest today.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it. I really like what you're doing, man. This is a great endeavor. I think it's something that, it's one of those things that once it comes out, you're like, why did this not exist before? But I'm very happy that you're doing this. I think it's invaluable to a lot of people. So congrats on having this podcast, man.
Thank you, Joey. Bye.
Thank you.